What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Blunt Instruments podcast. This is also going to be a YouTube video on the Bond's Apartment channel. So thank you guys for joining. Let's start with my co-host, Lorenzo. How are you, pal?
What's up, man? Doing good. Just a little early for me here in Vegas, but happy to be here with these two fine gentlemen, of course.
Yep. Got to sacrifice for the big dogs. I see you're supporting your team, per usual.
100% World Series champions.
Yep, we'll move on from that real quick. So who do we got? We've got Mr. David Zaritsky and Mr. Joe Darlington. How are you guys?
Doing great. Hello.
Doing good. Good morning, gentlemen.
Yeah. Early day for basically everybody, especially Lorenzo. But we're gonna power through. So Lorenzo and I wanted to have you guys on because the main discussion, now that the movie's been out for a little bit of time and everybody's seen it quite a bit, is who's the next Bond? When are we going to see the next Bond? What's in store? But we wanted to take a different approach and kind of start with the changeover in this hiatus period that we're in and the question marks that surround it. And I wanted to start with you guys because Lorenzo and I were very, very young when it went from Dalton to Brosnan, and then still pretty young when it went from Brosnan to Craig, but we had emotions for each one. So I wanted to start with you guys, specifically what it was like when these actors were moving over when you were kids until now, and what those experiences were like. So what exactly was the first one? Was it more to Dalton for you guys?
Yes.
And then what, do you remember that at all? What was that like as a kid versus, moving forward?
Joe, you want to go first? You want me to go first?
Yeah, I'll take it. I specifically do remember that very well. I remember anybody who's ever heard any of my podcasts knows that like my first ones were For Your Eyes Only and Octopussy. So I kind of got into Bond right at the time, that the changeover to Dalton was right about to kick in. He did A View to a Kill, and then that was it. And so, yeah, I remember very vividly that discussion and talking about it with friends. And I remember kind of being very happy. I heard Pierce Brosnan, and I knew, I knew who he was, and I knew the show he was on. So it was like, oh, okay, I see why they would pick him. And I thought it was cute and clever. But then when they went to Dalton, who everybody knew from Flash Gordon, and like that was a wildly different choice, and I was like, ooh, that kind of sounds interesting to me. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I can remember that the changing of the guard as early as Dalton, and kind of feeling like you had a horse in the race.
Yeah.
And I actually have almost the opposite experience. So for me, this was a situation.
Here we go.
It's begun early. I was absolutely a Roger Moore guy. And when I was young, A View to a Kill, I never saw Roger Moore as kind of the aging spy, or he's too old, or look how old he is versus Stacey Sutton. So to me, it was just going to be logical that there was going to be another one. I mean, I don't think as young people, the conversation came up nowadays of, well, yeah, he's getting too old, he's going to retire. You just thought your Bond was going to continue. Mm-hmm. But I kind of don't remember this big hiatus between Moore and Dalton. But all of a sudden, I do remember the commercials for Dalton's films coming out. And I forgot how old I was, but I was not old at all. And I just remember thinking to myself, oh, probably how kids nowadays think, oh, it's been a while since there's a Bond film. I guess there's a new Bond film. Like, there wasn't this big seismic thing of like, where'd Roger Moore go? What the hell? Who is this Timothy Dalton? Why does he look so strange? Why is he so serious? It was more of like, well, here comes another Bond film amongst all these other films that I like. So I remember going to the theater. I remember consuming the commercials and all the products that Timothy Dalton kind of ushered in, but I don't remember it as like a big changing of the guard.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. What was like an estimate age range when this was taking place?
So what year was
87 was Dalton's first.
87. So I was born in 68. So it's literally, I was 19 years old.
And
Okay.
I was a baby. So
Yeah. So 18 years old, let's face it, like I wasn't really thinking a lot about James Bond at that point, and I was into other movie genres. Like at 18, I remember very well, I was into like Bruce Lee and martial arts and things like that. James Bond was a nice to have moment.
Yeah. You said you were how old? Or when you were born when?
68.
Okay, so you were around for Sean Connery. Jesus Christ, Dave.
I wasn't.
Wow.
I mean, if I was a
Technically.
zygote, if they brought me in as like,
yeah.
a sperm, yeah.
So basically, comparing it to now, obviously, so let's move into Dalton the Brosnan then. Obviously a little older. Was there negative feelings between the two actors? Was it you were kind of wishing Dalton had more? Like, was there, because obviously now the four of us, with every Bond move ever made, we analyze and make videos and podcasts and posts and whatever. Obviously it was slightly different back then, but even just between friends or however you were doing it, was there like, oh damn, Dalton only got 2 films, what's going on? Was there anything like that going on?
Well, I will say, and I'm not going to win any hearts and minds of people in saying this, but there was a bit of rejoicing, at least in my friend group, of, we weren't that big of fans of License to Kill.
Mhm.
And Dalton's performance in the second one, we thought it was dour, serious, Miami Vice, even back then, all those different things. So Bond kind of just neutralized. Like it wasn't now where it's like, oh my gosh, when is the next Bond film? In 2 years? You just stopped talking about it. I mean, that's how movies were. You just didn't talk about it until you saw another commercial. And I remember seeing a little bit of press, even at that age, around Goldeneye, and that Brosnan was back, and there was a rejoicing. We're like, you got this good-looking guy. He looks like Bond. He's not going to be this dour individual. We knew him very, very well, like Joe said, from Remington Steele. So from Dalton to Brosnan, my grouping of friends, including myself, there was like a mini celebration.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say, like, at that point, Brosnan coming off of that, a huge success with Mrs. Doubtfire, acting against, Robin Williams, and his role kind of in that movie as like this, suave, like gentleman that's just kind of whisking his wife away. Do you think that was like kind of playing in his favor to like kind of showcase his kind of like sexiness as potential Bond?
It couldn't hurt. But as Joe mentioned, I think you guys know the story all too well. The Brosnan discussion happened way early. I mean, it's just like
Right.
Henry Cavill now. Henry Cavill almost made it into Casino Royale as Bond, but he was too young. Same with Remington Steele, same with Brosnan. And then you had all those contractual issues. So I think all of those factors played into it.
Yeah, and some of the like pre-photo shots that they have of Brosnan for Goldeneye, weren't those taken back in like 86, as a prelude to him being Bond for Living Daylights? Because you can tell by his hair.
Big hair.
Right?
Yeah. The bouffant.
The bouffant, like that.
So what about you, Joe?
About,
Your connection to.
Yeah, I it's funny as we have these conversations, it's amazing to me because it was such a, these were real formative years. When we talk about like, oh yeah, I first discovered For Your Eyes Only and I was 12, and then by the time he did A View to a Kill, I was 15, and that's kind of a significant leap when you're that young. And then by the time, The Living Daylights came out, I was 17 and I was able to drive there. And this was again like now I'm hot stuff because I can I forgot I could say hot shit on this podcast. Sorry.
Yeah,
so so yeah, but yeah, it's interesting because, and then I'm 19 when License to Kill comes out. I remember going to the drive-in, seeing it with my friends, but yeah, like David said, that one, it just kind of got lost in the shuffle because that one, it was kind of underwhelming. And that was the summer it was fighting against Michael Keaton's Batman, Lethal Weapon 2, Ghostbusters 2. Like there were so many big blockbusters that summer. Like I remember seeing all of them and kind of being like, hey guys, the new James Bond is out. Let's go see it. And they were like, oh yeah, fine, whatever. And we went, but nobody was really like dying to see this one then. So it did sort of quietly take its place somewhere else, and we had all our old movies as this kind of time set in where there was nothing happening. But then I remember, like, seriously being 24 and like life is just totally different, and like now this is a whole different world. And then all of a sudden you start seeing these trailers for a new Bond movie, and now you're kind of like your head picked up and you went, oh yeah, James Bond, like are we doing this again? This is so yeah, it was pretty cool, this kind of like this waking up of this old Bond thing. And yeah, and now like in your 20s going to see James Bond movies and bringing dates to see them and stuff. I mean, again, it's a whole different kind of world. So it was a lot of fun, kind of having this thing sort of wake up and come to life again.
Joe's got a really good point I didn't even think about. My gosh, poor Timothy Dalton came up against, even Last Crusade, Indiana Jones and stuff. And I remember Danielle and I, that was, I guess the summer that I met Danielle was 1989. So, I mean, talk about going back. And I was interested in obviously dating her and girls and big blockbuster movies. And I don't even remember going, I'm sure I did, to the theater to see Timothy Dalton, but Joe's got a phenomenal point in the sense that in my 20s, when Brosnan is coming on board, that's the informative years of where you're looking for style templates. When you see Brosnan, he looks like a walking hanger. He looks like a model, and you're like, from an emulation standpoint, I'm in my 20s, I'm a young executive. That's how you wear a suit.
Right.
Those are the type of shoes that I have. And you start to get into that, like Joe's saying, more of the pomp and circumstances of being in your 20s versus, the gnashing of the 18-year-old mindset.
David, I finally figured out why we had a hiatus between License to Kill and Goldeneye, because if Danielle had met you in the height of Bond, you would have been done. Forget it.
I'd be a guy living in a basement with a light bulb hanging over my head, swinging.
She needed 5 years to not know that James Bond was even a thing before.
Although Luke and Lorenzo are good examples of the women met them when they were, Bond fans, and they're both getting married.
Take it or leave it.
Poor Cassandra. That's all I have to say is poor Cassandra.
Yeah.
Oh,
part of the package. Sorry.
So to piggyback off that too, I pulled this up. So in 89, like you said, Joe, it was Batman, Indiana Jones, Lethal Weapon, but also Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, Rain Man, Look Who's Talking, Ghostbusters, Back to the Future, Part 2.
Yeah.
When Harry Met Sally, Uncle Buck. We're talking Christmas Vacation came out in 1989. So of the top grossing movies of 89, that movie falls all the way down to 36 on the list.
License to Kill?
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm surprised it's 36.
That's right behind or right in front of Weekend at Bernie's and Roadhouse. So,
hey, Joe, do you remember
Roadhouse?
Roadhouse. Joe, do you remember some of the merchandising and the commercialization of License to Kill?
Not much. I mean, I remember trailers, and I really don't remember any kind of merch or any of that stuff.
I remember Corgi stuff. I actually do, even in the States. I remember there were toys, and I just thought it was so bizarre to see James Bond toys, because Corgis, the DB5 as a kid was so indelible to me. It was such a great memory, but that's like the only thing but now you see like that it was like shaving stuff out there. I mean, they put a full court press, but I don't even remember
cars in License to Kill necessarily.
Well, they had the tanker and stuff like that. And
right. Okay.
That's a good question, because David, you obviously already said you were very excited with the Brosnan changeover. Joe, I'm curious to know what you think, because also with that merchandise came the video game. And when you look for Goldeneye, obviously, and when you look at the gross of these films, box office, Goldeneye over doubled. So what was it was there just an overwhelming embrace of Pierce Brosnan, or was it the games, the marketing?
It's definitely not the game, but I'll come back to that.
Right.
I think the timing was just right. I think, like you said, I think people were starting to notice Pierce and starting to say, that guy would make a really cool James Bond. It had been 5 years without a film, so I think people were kind of just sort of ready for something. I don't really remember it in the way I can remember a ton of movies in '89. I can't remember much in 95. I really don't. If you ask me what the competition was that year, I have no idea. I can't recall anything specifically. So I think just cinematically, I think people were kind of ready for a James Bond movie again. I definitely remember those trailers. You know the name, you know the number. It's a new world with new enemies, and I was like, oh, like I was ready. So the spark, I think the timing was just right. Everybody was ready. The game, interestingly, honestly, and even till this day, I sort of feel like the game almost in some way felt independent of the film, where so many people were into that game, and I had so much fun with that game, like everybody else, and it was fun. I remember, like, I think New Year's Eve, I remember my brothers and my cousins all kind of coming over, and we stayed up all night long playing Goldeneye, and having a blast doing it. I mean, we had a great time. But I remember kind of feeling like no one ever said to me, "Hey, I love this game so much. Can we go watch Goldeneye?" Right, no one ever drew that connection. I almost felt like the success of the game was almost independent of the movie. It was sort of weird. Like a lot, like the fans kind of go, "Hey, Goldeneye, that was us. We're the Bond fans, But I think a lot of people just sort of appreciated the game for what it was, and I don't really think they kind of brought the two together in their minds.
It was opposite for me. The game brought me to the film, and I think more so to the franchise.
But the game, honest with you, if you were living during that time and old enough, the game didn't come out around when the movie debuted.
No, it was like
well after,
like 96.
But
we're talking almost to where Tomorrow Never Dies.
Yeah, debuted. I was 4. See, that's the thing. I was 4 when the film came out. But then
I will say,
scare the shit.
And again,
out of
this is kind of cool that you guys are getting two different points of view. But in 95, I do remember all the hype. I remember they had this satellite clock that you could buy for Goldeneye. There was a lot of what they call preheating. I mean, my gosh, everybody, of course, remembers the commercial. And I think it was almost like they made Bond fashionable again. Like Timothy Dalton's Bond, say what you will, it had really fallen out of fashion to like James Bond. And Brosnan, maybe the way he looked, his personality, but the commercialization of it all, they brought it back. So if you remember Batman in 1989, people weren't like, "Ugh, is this going to be like Adam West?" People couldn't wait to see Tim Burton's Batman just because of like the logo everywhere and the t-shirts. And Goldeneye did a really good job. There were t-shirts, there were posters, there was things everywhere. There was Wonder Bread. You had Wonder Bread, Goldeneye Wonder Bread, and you're like, what the hell? So by the time it came out, you were like, I got to see this. And that's, I was rabid for it then.
So for reference, to back your point, the highest grossing films of 1995, Die Hard, Toy Story, Apollo 13, on number 4, Goldeneye.
Toy Story was in 1995?
Yep.
Holy shit.
So Goldeneye was number 4, where Dalton's last film was, what did I say, 35 or 37? So this also beat out Pocahontas, Batman Forever, Seven, Casper, Waterworld, and Jumanji.
And that just I don't want to jump on. That sort of goes to my point, is that if you hear the titles like Die Hard, especially, you go, "Oh well, Die Hard." Yeah, but Die Hard wasn't Die Hard back then. Die Hard was like this little independent nothing. No one really knew what it was until all of a sudden it was out and it kind of blew up. And even Toy Story, again, that was the first one. It wasn't like these weren't like all the sequels stacked up that everyone knew and were waiting on. So it was kind of like, even though there was some good stuff, especially Die Hard, it wasn't like people were sitting there waiting for these big movies to come out. It was kind of empty. So Goldeneye was the one I think people were noticing.
Yeah, all very critically acclaimed, but not, highly anticipated.
Not franchises, not stuff that people know.
Go ahead.
I don't know if you guys remember this, but they attached a trailer to Bond with Dunstan Checks In, which also came out around 95.
Oh my gosh,
and it was
the
Dunstan. They used the exact same commercial for the name, the number, but it was Dunstan doing it. So it was kind of funny. Like, I think they wrote that right off of Goldeneye. So it was interesting because I remember coming across that, like, I don't know, a couple months ago.
I'm gonna need to look that up.
It's hilarious.
Classic film. George
Because I
Costanza.
asked Cassandra, I was just like, have you ever seen Dunstan Checks In? She's like, no, what's that? And so like I was looking up a trailer, and that's when I found it. And I was like, oh, okay. So I started laughing about it. But also you got to remember the fact of that Goldeneye was released during Christmas versus the summer, like, you know, Living Day, or sorry, License to Kill was. So I mean, I feel like that played another factor, and it was like kind of the era of like the internet was becoming big at that time, and just kind of getting off the ground. So we're getting like different kind of media outlets influencing the way people consume, you know, like either movie information or whatever. Because that's another thing that I think is a huge difference is compared to Craig's departure from Brosnan's departure. It was, I feel like there's more online forums now. There's communications like very hands-on, very like, I mean, look right in front of us, like it's crazy. But that really influences how we take in and receive information from, you know, the studios or, you know, Eon.
Yeah. So
that
sorry,
License to Kill was definitely a pivotal moment in terms of them getting, like, again, because of what we just talked about, made them very gun shy about going up against the summer blockbusters, which is kind of a shame, but part of life.
Yeah. So just out of curiosity, what do you think was the downfall for Tomorrow Never Dies as far as competing in the year that came out? Because similar to Goldeneye, well, yeah, but it fell to 19 on the highest grossing. It was beaten by literally even My Best Friend's Wedding and a re-release of Star Wars Episode 4 and Men in Black and Jurassic Park, Liar Liar, Air Force One, things like that. But also came out in December. So did people, because obviously Goldeneye was the best critically acclaimed Brosnan film, except for Die Another Day is up there, right? Like just barely. So with that, it's like, what was the difference? You know, and we're not talking like with us now, it wasn't 6 years in between. It was only 2 years.
Yeah. You know what? So it's really hard for me to say because I do remember really, really well Tomorrow Never Dies being extremely popular with my friends, my family, myself when it first came out. I remember seeing Titanic. Everything was around Titanic, and then everything else trickled down from there. Like you saw Titanic, and then if you had one more other movie to go to, you'd find some other movie to go to. But the one thing with Tomorrow Never Dies is it's so hard for me to get into the movie going mindset because again, I can only speak as a Bond fan. That was a huge deal. In fact, in some ways, I actually think Tomorrow Never Dies, the reason I like it so much is there was definitely more pomp and circumstance around that movie than Goldeneye. Because Goldeneye, they put a full core press, but they were like, gosh, I hope we can make Bond come back. I hope we can revitalize the franchise. Tomorrow Never Dies felt like they're in it. Now we've got James Bond back. Now let's take the franchise forward. We're going to have fun with it. We're going to have frivolity. We're going to have stunts. We're going to have vehicles. And then Brosnan even was more pithy and more comfortable. So screw what level it came in, 19, 36, who cares? For the Bond fan, Bond was back and better than ever.
Yeah.
I felt like Brosnan in Tomorrow Never Dies, it was like he had figured out the role at that point. Like after Goldeneye getting his feet wet, to me, that's like his, like, in my opinion, it's his pinnacle movie because of just the way he carries himself and just the delivery and the action. Like I felt like it was a well-balanced job by him that time around versus, Goldeneye. I felt like he's still kind of like, bright-eyed, new to the whole role, but I don't know. I felt like his look and everything was like perfect in that film.
I agree.
Yeah.
And the best thing about the film, he doesn't die.
Too soon.
Too soon.
Sorry.
Too soon.
I'm jumping decades.
I think, Tomorrow Never Dies for me sort of falls into that thing that Dave and I have talked about, the sophomore effort. Yeah. It does kind of lose a little bit of that, like, when Goldeneye comes out, it's a new Bond, it's a new Bond actor, it's 6 years since we've seen one before, 5 years, and we're all in the waiting room to see if it's going to be a boy or a girl. Like we're just, we're waiting to see what this is going to be. By the time Tomorrow Never Dies comes out, you know what you're getting. So it kind of, a little bit of that Marvel, gets a little lost. So, and I think it's a fine effort. But again, all of those Brosnans are starting to do that thing where it's like, oh yeah, this was good. I wish they did that a little differently. And I you know, wasn't perfect, but it was good. You know,
Mhm.
so you're kind of just sort of getting like a good enough vibe from it. So it wasn't like, you know, what, not this kind of like just blockbuster, oh my God thing.
Yeah. So Brosnan to Craig. So now you've got a vastly different actor. You've got all the issues with him being blonde and all these different things. You've got some of the lack of notoriety. What was it like then compared to the other ones? Obviously substantially different, but living through it.
Mm,
To me, this was the most shocking one
Mhm.
because Die Another Day, as many faults as it has, you know, people mostly still had fun. I think it did very well.
It did.
You know, and you could tell me otherwise, but there really wasn't all of this kind of, again, preheat that, oh, well, you know, of course they're going to replace him. So when it was announced that he wasn't coming back and there was somebody new coming on
Right.
board and everybody saw him, like, I didn't get on the whole blonde bandwagon issue. I
Mhm.
didn't have any issue with that, but I'm like, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel like Pierce Brosnan, the classiness, the gravitas that he brought, that combination of Roger Moore's humor and Sean Connery's swagger. I'm like, I'm not seeing it on this guy.
Mhm.
And obviously, before seeing Casino Royale and being convinced, I was very dubious. So for me, this was by far the most shocking one out of all the ones we've mentioned. I was just like, this doesn't feel like Bond. And actually, I will tell you this, I'll go one step further. My wife, who still loves Pierce Brosnan today, was just like, who's the rugby player? Like, what is this? Like,
Mhm.
this is like, they're taking this in a weird direction.
And
Yeah.
it was funny because for me also, I was under the impression that Brosnan was doing one more, and that's the way they were selling it for like a year or two after the fact, that he signed on for a fifth film. And you know, I was just kind of poking around there and that here and there, you know, trying to get as much information as I could. And then all of a sudden it's like he's out. And I was like, what's going on
Yeah.
here? It was like shock.
And
you
that
know?
quickly too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Lorenzo,
Mhm.
that's a great point because, and again, I keep bringing it back to style, but at this time, I mean, the full on Bond lifestyle and clothing scene was like going full bore.
Right.
And he was such a style template. It's almost like, even if Die Another Day was bad, the suits, the shoes, the watches, everything
Yes.
was so great
Yes.
that all of a sudden, it's almost like what you guys have said to me today. Like, are you still going to collect? Are you still going to get wardrobe from the next Bond film when it's not Daniel Craig? Well, imagine growing up with Pierce Brosnan as my style template and then going, who's this guy?
Yeah.
You know, in the Brooks Brothers suit, you know, coming down the Thames in a life jacket. I'm like,
Yeah.
whoa,
And where do we go from here?
where do we
Yeah.
go?
Yeah.
I mean, the Die Another Day scene in the hotel when he goes from drab to fab is incredible. It's incredible.
Secret fountains of desire.
Mhm.
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 What was interesting really about the change from Brosnan is that, well, I'll say it this way. What was fascinating about the idea that they let Brosnan go, the movies were making money. You know,
Right.
that's the thing that I think everyone kind of went, wow, like they were doing, I mean, it was they were sort of getting to where I would almost call these like, these were the Bonds. By the time you get to Die Another Day, we're talking about the Bond franchise. It's like Transformers and Fast and the Furious. They're kind of getting to be just kind of like silly nonsense, but everyone's loving it. So
Right.
people are going. Don't mess with it. But I will say, I remember. I mean, I remember these were the years like every time a new Bond movie would come out, like I would probably go see it once or twice, but I would always make sure to grab my dad, take my dad to go see the new Bond movie. And my dad grew up on the Fleming books. You know, he was the one, you know, Sean Connery was the greatest Bond, and he read all the books and loved them. So I took him to see Die Another Day, you know, and I remember walking out and he just sort of went, so I guess these movies are just kind of basically fantasy movies at this point. They're really nothing to do
Right.
with like spying and whatever. And I was like, yeah, you know, like I'm kind of like, you know, I can't.
Indefensible.
Right. I'm like, what am I can't argue with that. I mean, so I think that even though the movies are popular, I can see if I'm Barbara and Michael kind of feeling like these movies just don't have the gravitas that we would like them to have. So I guess you could sort of feel why the change came, but it still was kind of a surprise.
So I actually have a question for both of you on that topic particularly. So in 2003, we got Born Identity.
Yeah.
How much of an influence do you think that played and them being like, let's pump the brakes on this. We need to reposition ourselves. And I think at that time, correct me if I'm wrong, they had just won the rights over for Casino Royale. So they're kind of like itching to make this movie also. So do you think it was just the perfect storm that they're like, we need to reboot?
And to further prove your point, before you guys answer, Bourne actually came out the same year, 2002. They were both the same year.
2002. Wow.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've always aligned, maybe this is just as my view of historical Bond. I've always aligned Quantum of Solace to the Bourne movies just because of the way it's shot and the action orientation. Whereas I think Casino Royale is its own standalone. I honestly think with the advent of getting Casino Royale, and that was such a big deal to Eon and the producers, they probably wanted to say, first of all, it's the beginning of Bond. Literally, it's, you know, the first book. It's the beginning of Bond. We can't have an aging Bond in that particular role. It's all how he gets his, you know, 00, and they were going in this direction. So I feel like it didn't serve the story to have Pierce Brosnan back. So that to me had more of an influence than anything else. And then doing a very rough and tumble, no gadget, no money penny, was just to get back to the raw basics of who Bond is, to reintroduce that and make you feel it was. And listen, I'll side with Joe on this. I mean, this newest movie, No Time to Die, was a raw, bold choice where they took the ending, of course. Some it won them over, like Joe, some like me, not so much. But Casino Royale was very similar. I mean, it didn't feel like your dad's James Bond. And I think that was just a very conscious decision on their own. I don't think they were wholly influenced by Bourne or anything else.
I'll tell you what, I'll disagree with that a little bit. I do
Screw
feel
you,
like
Joe. This ends the podcast.
No good.
Sorry.
Final word.
I've always
Please
felt
don't.
that Casino Royale has a lot to. It owes a lot to not only Bourne but also Batman Begins. I feel like those two films are very influential to Casino Royale in a good way, because I feel like, I mean, you're talking about, you know, what's interesting about, I mean, Bourne was sort of its own thing, even though it's based on a book, and even though, but it for all practical purposes, it's sort of a unique new thing. That was, I mean, the lesson from that was that, you mean you can really do like kind of classic spy espionage, jet setting in foreign cities, and it can be cool and hip. And then you had Batman Begins, which I think was a huge influence, because what that movie was again going from Batman and Robin, the Joel Schumachers, the campiness that almost made the 60s Batman look serious. Like Batman Begins took that and totally did it in a way that, you can honor and respect and explore this character and do it in a way that pays him the respect he's due, and again, make it look pretty hip and cool. So I think those are the two big influences on Casino Royale. I think Casino absolutely, and yes, the fact that they got the rights to do the first book, was huge. I think they just thought this is all the planets just aligned perfectly, and that's why this film was just so great. I remember, but before I even knew who Daniel Craig was, probably right around 98, 99, I was putting together a fan film, and it was Casino Royale, but it kind of had like that sort of Brosnan style. I never got very far with it, but I did sort of script it out. But I was doing it in a way where I was falling into the exact traps, again, trying to make it kind of Brosnan-ish, falling into the same traps that you probably would have assumed that they would have done. Whereas, like, yes, there's a card game, but the villain is really up to there's really like a big satellite somewhere, and he's got his real plot is somewhere over there. You couldn't make the card game the whole movie, but thank God they didn't do that. Thank God they did it the way they did it, where they are faithful to the novel. And it is kind of a little more about just espionage and bad guys doing bad things. And it's very Fleming-esque, the final product. So, again, just in keeping with the spirit of talking about just how the times really reflected what was happening. If Casino came out just a couple of years earlier, I think it would have looked a lot different. So the fact that the audiences were sort of ready to get serious again and take things a little more seriously, it really did work to Bond's benefit.
Do you think that we could actually see some of the raw film footage of your fan movie?
I gotta see if I can. There was so little to it. I was just sort of running around shooting some things. I remember I did throw in a shot of I had a model DB5 and it was the first time I ever tried to do a green screen where I tried to make it look like it was driving down my street. Gosh. But of course, like it's driving past my house, so like who cares?
Joe, you absolutely need to send this to me, and it's going bang right here.
Again, don't get your hopes up. I didn't get very far with it.
Oh my God.
Joe, you're telling me that Arnold Schwarzenegger's ice skating henchman wasn't serious to you in Batman? That wasn't just like everything you ever wanted and more?
No, it wasn't exactly chill out.
So my last question for the ousting of Brosnan, like you said, Joe and David, they were making money, and Die Another Day, I mean, you can adjust for inflation and all that bullshit, but it was only 3 years later. It out-earned the second highest grossing by almost 70 million. So they earned the rights to Casino Royale. Was it really that important for them to be like, we have to make this movie now? Right. It has to be the next one. And even though we've made the most money we've ever made, and Brosnan's, critically, who cares? But financially, he's up there. People are still going, more people than ever. Let's get rid of him and start over with somebody relatively unknown.
See, this is where I agree with Joe, because like we're seeing this huge tone shift in the way they're making action movies, in other franchises. And I feel like that was like a little bit more influence to like kind of go that direction, be like, all right, see, Pierce, like we're gonna make this movie now, and you're not gonna be the guy to have the role. So I mean, I tend to lean towards what Joe is talking about how Christian Bale came in as Batman and kind of like cleaned the slate and like changed the tone of how the fan base looks at the films. So
yeah, I think though, believe it or not, in this case, everybody's right, and I'll explain. Eon has been, I don't want to say guilty, but they've had a track record of doing two things: borrowing from whatever's hot and current, and that goes to Joe's point, right, about Batman Begins and things like that. But also, when they get a bright new shiny toy on Christmas, they gravitate to it. Spectre's a great example. They didn't really know what to do with Spectre, but they got the rights back around Spectre, the name. So what they do? They made a whole movie called Spectre. Even though, was it really about Spectre? Was it connected? Was it well formed out? I don't know, but they got it back. It's a little similar with Casino Royale. So I agree with Joe. I mean, and it's a point that I had totally forgotten. You have this crescendo going on, this streamlining that Eon tends to gravitate to. Plus, whenever they get their new thing in, they want to open it right away. They don't want to wait too long.
Yeah. The whole Craig era, I think, is absolutely positively Barbara Broccoli's. That is her contribution to the world of James Bond. I mean, I think there's no two ways about it. I think that the shift from Brosnan to Craig, it's like you said, they were making money. They could have just kept things. I mean, I suppose on one hand, you could argue that she's trying to sort of predict the market before it happens. Like, don't wait until we're not making money to start making changes and changing with the times. That's one argument. The other argument, I think, is simply just an artistic statement where she's simply saying, look, we can do good business, but we can also shift lanes and kind of go from, again, these goofy Fast and the Furious things and get into some more, a little more sophisticated. I've heard critics of Barbara Broccoli say, they're trying to turn James Bond into something that's going to earn Oscars. And I think there's something to be said for that. I think, positive and negative. Again, I want fun James Bond movies, but it wouldn't kill us either to have something that you can bring people to and sort of feel like, this is a pretty respectable, good, solid movie. I mean, honestly, I sort of flash back to one of my favorite scenes from one of the novels is simply James Bond sitting in front of Fouquet's on the Champs-Elysees in Paris, drinking an Americano, right? We were sort of at a time where I could easily see Jason Bourne sitting at that restaurant with that cocktail than I can James Bond, who is like again, Die Another Day. We see one shot of the Aston Martin driving towards this ice palace, which looks more like the Wizard of Oz than James Bond, and then everything else there is just done on a set. Like 45 minutes of the movie is just on this set, and it's like, again, I'm not getting the kind of, you know, travel and the exotic things that I want from Bond, and there's other franchises that are doing it better. I could actually even go back a couple years earlier to True Lies with you know, when Schwarzenegger did True Lies. A lot of people saw that one and said that's another spy film that's kind of doing it bigger, better, different, and I think that caused a little shift back then. But the Bourne movies definitely had an effect on these.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, you know, and the thing is too, the interesting thing about bringing up Fast and Furious is you can say that the first one was, you know, although about street racing, it was about what it was about, and it had its point, and it was, you know, not outrageous. What?
Family.
Yeah, it's about family. It's about family. But you know, those are movies that have taken the money that they're making and went with it as hard as they possibly can, and they're just making them more and more and more and more ridiculous as each one goes out, and they've lost me years ago, you know. So Barbara Broccoli took this time and she's like, we made a bunch of money, we made the most money we've ever made, but all these films are coming out, and before we get wildly out of hand, we got to just change with the times.
All right, so I have a question for this group, not to turn the tables, but again, bold choice with No Time to Die's ending, where you kill off your character in Bond. Do you think that was Daniel Craig request in saying, if I come back, I want to kill this character? Or do you think it was, hey, we haven't done something really bold since Casino Royale to kind of flip this on its side? We're going to be moving to another Bond. We got to go out on a strange, wonderfully bold note. Here we go.
Okay.
What do you think?
I want to take this one first. So
Please.
for me, as soon as I saw the ending, my brain immediately went to that Daniel Craig's at a party with Hugh Jackman, and he literally said, "I saw you killed yourself." And Daniel Craig goes, "Watch, I'm gonna do this shit." And Hugh Jackman goes, "Yeah, fucking kill Bond." And Daniel like almost is egged on to like kind of do this, but also it's a stylistic choice too. And Daniel, being the theater guy that he is, I feel like he was like, "Oh, I have to kill myself. This is what I have to do." I think that the whole statement of him knowing this ending 15 years ago, complete horseshit. I don't think he knew that. I think in his head, like maybe, but if that was the plan all along.
Yeah. Well, he's also talked about how he didn't want to come back like after every freaking movie that he did.
So I take that with very little weight. So I really think it was more or less like, I'm tired of being asked the question from coming back. That's not so much as the other thing, but it's more or less that he just wanted to make an impact with his departure.
Joe?
I think it's going to be kind of an all of the above sort of an answer. I think that, see, it's funny, you know, I hear everybody saying that this had to come from Craig. This was Craig's thing. He wanted this character to, and I kind of feel like I don't think that is without merit. But on the other hand, there's a voice in my head going like, have you guys not noticed that the Bond movies tend to sort of just follow what's popular? Like trust me, they've been doing this for quite a while. If it's popular in movies, you'll probably see it in James Bond about 2 or 3 years later. So yeah, I mean, this was obviously this prediction was floating around for a long time. Again, you had Logan, Iron Man. I mean, it was just like if he's got a daughter, forget it. He's goodbye. He's done. That's like that. You might as well be a girlfriend in a Mel Gibson movie. You're done. You were not long for this world.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, that's like as soon as the daughter showed up, you just like, oh, there it is. You know, they're gonna kill him up.
Whoop, there it is.
So I suppose, and it's interesting. I don't want to try to lead us into a big discussion about whether or not we should have killed off James Bond. unless you guys want to. But I kind of felt like, well, yeah. I mean, again, this whole Craig era was pretty much from its inception kind of a different universe. I kind of felt like if you're literally going to say we are officially this time actually rebooting the franchise instead of maybe kind of like quietly rebooting it like we did with I mean, to me, Goldeneye was always like just sort of like an unspoken reboot. Like it just everything about it felt like a new universe. We're doing James Bond again. It's not the same guy who did all that other stuff. We're just not really going to mention it. Craig was the first time because reboots are popular now. We're rebooting the franchise. It's all new. Okay, fine. So it always felt like this kind of different experiment. So the fact that you started literally watching him get his 00, so it's okay, we get it, like totally brand new right out of it. Like we just unwrapped this box, put the batteries in, we're getting started now. So the fact that they ended it in a different way, it to me is not all that shocking. Like I sort of feel like in some ways it kind of made logical sense. And again, I a lot of people walked out of this just stunned that they killed off James Bond, and I'm like, but I kind of feel like I don't know. I feel like you guys are giving it a lot more credit than it really deserves, even though I thought it was fine and I don't mind it. I'm not giving it that much credence either, because it was like, but you knew they were going to end this. They knew the Craig era is over. You know that they're going to have to reboot it again afterwards. So I almost felt like they killed him off when it didn't even matter. So it doesn't really. Go ahead.
I know we're not going to get into like a whole did it end the right way, didn't end the right way, but I will say this as it pertains to this subject. I just felt like when Brosnan's reign was going on, Connery's reign, Roger Moore's reign, even Timothy Dalton's, there was never any discussion of fans of like, oh, well, this is, Dalton's era, this whole new terminology of Daniel Craig's era. And of course it has to end this way. You know what? There were reboots, but they were always reboots about just the actor. It wasn't like a whole reboot of the character. Daniel Craig's tenure feels like it's a reboot of the entire character. And then this last movie, a thing that I felt like, and I'm still kind of stung with, is they made a conscious choice to say, this is really about an actor's choice. So you're going to buy into the fact that these 5 films are its own piece, separate from any of the others. The others are something else. We never did that before. I don't remember growing up and having that, or Brosnan or anything like that. So when did that become the pinnacle, as opposed to, I would actually fence with you and say the bolder move would be having a Craig Bond film that ends on a happy note, because none of them do. None of them do. He fails. It's miserable. People die. Imagine if he walked down and he's like, dun, 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 I won. That would have been the unusual. You're right, Joe. Him dying, de rigueur.
I guess in my mind there's, I wish I had a crystal ball where I could sort of look in and say, okay, what if James Bond literally walked out of here and went off into the sunset with not only the girl, but the kid in the back seat? Would fans be happy with this? And I doubt it. I sort of feel like it probably ended the way it had to sort of end. And I don't know. Again, it was almost like, Spielberg, said in one of the documentaries for one of the Raiders movies, he said, sometimes, when you're writing story, you just paint yourself into a corner. And he says, and the only thing you can do is just run so quickly through the wet paint, hoping no one will see your footprints. And I kind of feel like in some ways, I'll concede that this killing off James Bond sort of falls into that, where it's like, we took this all the way until this point. How do you possibly cap it off in a way that makes logical sense? And I sort of feel like, and again, I don't think it was executed perfectly. I'm certainly not saying that, but I do sort of feel like there is kind of a logic to bringing this particular version of Bond to a conclusion. And you're 100% correct, that it does sort of, punctuate the idea that this Craig is its own experiment. But honestly, I feel like we've been living that anyway. like you said, up until and this is why I always say that Brosnan kind of winked and rebooted, didn't say anything. Like up until the last Dalton, all of the players, like we had, Bernard Lee's M went into Robert Brown's M. We had other characters. We had Desmond Llewellyn, who stayed through the franchise right up until then. So we were able to sort of keep it, even though there's wild changes happening, throughout, we were able to sort of keep it consistent. This is the same thing. Nothing has really changed. Once you get to Brosnan, it's kind of like a lot of things got rebooted, but they just didn't mention it. Like you never heard a mention of Tracy in the Brosnans. All of a sudden there was Paris Carver, who was this old flame. Like there was a lot of little things. Like if you look at it, it's like, it does feel like its own, but they just didn't say anything. With Craig, they really did. They were like, hey, look what we're doing here. It's different. So, in that respect, either you love it or you don't love it, I guess. But at the end of the day, we're still going to get more Bond stuff. So whether or not that Bond is dead or not almost doesn't even matter, really.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned people potentially not being thrilled with the ending of him riding off in the sunset. What do you think about the people that, because I know they're out there because my mother is one of them. She went and saw this. My dad insisted on seeing it. And this guy doesn't watch movies. So they went, and my mom called me. She's like, I thought it was Pierre. She's like, I thought it was fantastic. My mom was like, I thought it was great. And we're talking about somebody who was born in the 50s. So she was like, I loved it. She's seen them all, whatever. But she did say, she's like, I'm not entirely sure why they had to kill him. But she's like, as a whole, I liked it. And I was like, well, that's just, there's going to be a new actor or whatever. She's like, no, there's not. I'm like, what do you mean? No, she's like, well, they killed James Bond. How are they going to make another one? So for the casual fan who didn't stay until the very last second to see that James Bond will return, and we didn't need to see that to know that there will be another one, but
right.
Are there going to be people pissed off that they killed him and then all of a sudden he's back again?
My Thanksgiving dinner was at my niece's, and this very subject came up, where they were shocked when they heard me say, yeah, I think it's going to take another 4 or 5 years to really have another film. And they said, oh, they're going to keep doing them. And they saw the film and they thought, oh, okay, so they're ending the franchise. Right. I would say the casual fan definitely thought that this is going to be the end of James Bond. Like there was time, they ended it. It's an old series. It was fun, but over to you, kiddo. There's other stuff to do.
Yeah.
I mean, did any of the three of us even think that for a split second?
No,
God, no.
Four of us, I should say.
No.
So, yeah, and I'll even take it one better. There's a part of me that is, I know this is the last Craig, but I also know in the back of my mind, Amazon just purchased James Bond. There's a part of me that feels like not only am I confident we're going to get James Bond, I actually have a little bit of a fear that in the era of content creation and streaming services galore, they might even overdo it. Mm-hmm. I'm even mildly concerned that suddenly somebody's going to go, we have the Bond label. What are we going to do with it? Let's make 27 different. Like if you saw, it's funny, Star Wars since Disney bought it has obviously had a lot of. It's been it hasn't gone swimmingly. And right around when the Rise of Skywalker came out, I forget who said it. One of the execs at Disney said, I think the problem is that we put out too much too fast. So we're going to pump the brakes a little bit and just slow things
Quality
down a little bit.
Quantity.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, so that and that was only after 3 films plus 2, a little in between things. And then all of a sudden, The Mandalorian, kaboom, is real popular. Then they come out with this gigantic timeline of like 15 products that are coming out in the next couple of years, movies, shows, real life, animated, just like kaboom. So I sort of look at that moment in time of James Bond saying to myself, somewhere there's execs talking about what's going to happen. They might pump the brakes and slow it down, or they might just go crazy. And before you know it, we're oversaturated and trying to tread water at all of the things that they're doing.
So I want to get everybody's reaction on something that happened last week. There was a Q&A at a showing of No Time to Die that a bunch of people went to, and there was a quote from Greg Wilson, who was the heir apparent, obviously, to Michael G. and Barbara. And he said, because somebody just asked, like, when's the next Bond? It says Bond will return. And he said, it's going to be a bit, but it's only because we're creating an entire Bond world.
Oh, God.
So we've got a quote from the heir apparent saying it's going to be a Bond world. Now, I get that in the sense that you're right, Joe. Amazon purchased them. James Bond is a product. That's why they purchased them, not because of their love of James Bond. They're going to productize. And just when I hear a quote like that, I wonder, like, oh, wow, what does that mean, a Bond world? I mean, is the Harry Potter wizarding world like at Universal? Is Universal going to have a Bond world? I'm in. So there could be things that we embrace, but then, you know, is it going to be the Moneypenny Diaries, you know, series 1? And I don't know.
Romantic or like graphic novels or something. Romance novels.
This makes me think about like what's going on with Marvel right now. I feel like they're losing a little bit of their shine with oversaturation, and it's
TV
like
shows.
It's too much. Like
Can't
I'm
keep
not
up with
gonna lie. Like I feel I've seen every Marvel movie in theaters. I haven't missed one. I finally missed the Eternals because I was just like, it didn't look that great to me. I was like, I'll just watch that
It
when
was
it
Joe's
comes out.
favorite movie of the year. That's strange.
You know, you just made me realize, that I think Eternals was the first Marvel movie that came out that I actually said I have no interest in it and I'll skip it. And I didn't even do that consciously. I almost forgot it was a Marvel movie, really.
I said I would get to it. I was like, oh, maybe I'll go see it. And then I just, you know, with everything with Bond going on and all that stuff, I was just like more focused on that. And I was like, I'll just catch it later. But then, you know, you watch like Loki, which I enjoyed that. But then I watched 1 or 2 episodes of WandaVision. And I was like, I can't. I don't have the patience.
Well, what about the next? There's a Marvel series coming out that's literally just about Thor's hammer. It's like a whole 8-part series that follows the life of the hammer. I'm joking, but can you imagine?
I believe you.
I
completely
believe
you.
But here's the thing: you guys bought it because Marvel has become this thing where it's like the janitor in the background that's cleaning up New York City after the first thing. He's got his own show.
Yeah. They're either running out of content, or they know people are going to pay to watch this shit. And it for me, it's just a money grab at that point. You know, you're sacrificing good material for just putting out quantity. And that's the balance between the two, is quality over quantity. I mean, obviously I'd like a Bond film every 2 to 3 years versus every 5.
Yeah.
But I don't want one every other year either, because I don't want it to be oversaturated.
Yeah.
See, but that's the thing, though. The problem is the thing that I worry about is that some like Marvel is. I mean, when my brother and I were kids, we had stacks and stacks and stacks of comics. We had posters with all of these characters, like hundreds of these superheroes all lined up. You know, to where we're looking in the background, going, "Do I know who that one is? Do I know who that one is?" Somewhere there's an exec who's looking at a stack of Fleming books, and I'm reaching behind me on my bookshelf. It's this big. It's this stack is only about 12, 14 books in. I don't see how you take that and make Bond world. I don't see how you make a destination in Disney Bond world. I don't know how you do that. But somewhere, like I said, I think there's someone who's gonna try, and that makes me just a little nervous. I'd love it if it could happen and it could be successful. But we might be overreaching a little bit.
Ben Winshaw's Cat Emporium at Disney. All the hairless cats you want.
I have one more question for you guys, and then I just want to touch on what's next before we wrap it up. But as far as, so Joe, like you mentioned with Amazon, so with Star Wars, Lucas sells the rights completely to Disney. So he's no longer involved at all, barely. And with Amazon and Bond, they sell the rights, but Barbara and Michael are still involved. So when they're promoting No Time to Die, and this is just maybe a conspiracy theory, and they're constantly saying how it's in cinemas where it belongs. We're seeing it in cinemas where this film belongs repeatedly. Is that just a mantra because of streaming and COVID, or is it we're already getting pressure to do other things and we don't want to?
I think that the parallels between this one and Lucasfilm are great because, and and I don't think it's a conspiracy theory to just sort of say this is what happens when these kind of mergers and buyouts happen. I sort of wonder, are we going to now, like Lucas sold to Disney, he put Kathleen Kennedy in place to sort of what he thought was going to be his sort of spokesperson, somebody who's going to represent his brand. Then, of course, once he's out, George, thanks for the input. We're going to do something completely different. Goodbye. Mm-hmm. And now he's on, doing interviews where he's calling them white slavers. It's like, all right, so I guess there's a little bad blood. I guess, okay, I see that. I could definitely see Bond sort of going down that same route, that kind of rocky road, where we're selling the franchise, but we're still here. We're still going to lead the way. We're still going to make sure. But somebody over at Amazon's going, yes, sure you are. We didn't pay billions of dollars, so you can just do exactly what you've done with no influence by us. And there's going to be a lot of hands in this pie. So it'll be interesting to see who wins. It's going to be interesting to see whose vision, it comes to the forefront, and there'll be some drama coming, I think.
I have a question, because I might be a little confused on my own, right? But I was under the interpretation that it was MGM's rights that were sold to Amazon, and Eon still held their rights. So, which is a distribution rights, which is a controlling factor in anything James Bond.
Yes, that's true. However, to kind of back up what Joe's saying, up until about a week ago, I thought this was a phase one out of two phases for Amazon. I thought the first one was to get the MGM distribution, 50% ownership type thing. Usually, even outside of the movie world, that's usually a ramp up for an entire purchase. When I saw that they killed off Bond, I don't even know why I'm doing that. They killed it off. No bunny air quotes. I thought, well, yeah, okay. They probably, the family may be selling it off to Amazon, and Amazon's going to own this. And this could have been the inertia the entire time. However, the reason I say up until a week ago, now that I heard Greg Wilson say that, now listen, maybe the family has what's called a founder agreement. So what happens is a founder agreement is a 10-year ramp. When a company gets bought by a founder company of owners, like family ownership, like Eon, they can get a 10-year ramp where the family members, like Greg Wilson, have to stay in place. So for 10 years, he's still the senior executive producer, et cetera. So that quote could go back to that. He's still going to be working for Amazon in a way. But I did really, up until then, think I think this is a bigger play for the entire franchise.
Mm-hmm. So do you think Eon's in or out? I guess is my question now.
Yeah.
I think they're still in if you think about it from an involvement standpoint. But as from an ownership or a majority ownership, I think it's to be seen. It's all speculative, but
right.
So, I think Eon is still in the same way George Lucas was still in for quite a while. And I
Joe, right to the neck with it.
Well, Joe, so let's take the same pattern. Now that if you believe everything you hear, they're begging for Lucasfilm to come back in some regards, and he's even directed some episodes of some of the things coming back. Could that happen with Eon, where they, go away and they're like, Barbara, we need you back because you had the magical touch?
Completely. That's a very good possibility. I could absolutely see a scenario where that happens. I mean, again, like I said, my fear is that you're going to get executives now who kind of just see opportunity. They see dollar signs. They say James Bond has been around for years. It's been successful. And honestly, I mean, seriously, if you look at some of the material, I mean, honestly, like content creation has exploded. I mean, I kind of feel like all of these streaming services, struggling to come up with the next show, the next whatever. When you look at some of the things, I mean, whoever thought Cobra Kai would have been like one of the biggest, hottest things from an obscure, smallish movie in the 80s You know, I mean, honestly, they're at the point, and I don't want to sound overly cynical because I think there's a lot of really good stuff coming out, but I mean, they'll make a show out of anything at this point. I mean, if it was popular at some point, it's gonna be. I mean, I just went to see the new Ghostbusters. I mean, I liked it fine. It was pretty good. A love letter to the original. But again, going back to the 80s to make more stuff, more Predators, more Aliens, more, you know, any old Terminators, they don't let anything sit still. So I feel like if anybody gets a hold of James Bond, I mean, no one is going to let that collect dust. They're going to try to wring that sponge for every drop it's worth.
Yeah.
So again, that's kind of where my fear sits. It's not that Bond is gone. Believe honestly, like when everyone's saying this is the end of James Bond, I'm like, guys, trust me, my brain is 180 degrees and 100 miles from where you are. I'm far more worried that somebody's going to take the franchise now and just go gangbusters with it and really try to. I mean, honestly, there is sort of there is somewhere in this spectrum of, like, you know, no James Bond to too much James Bond. There is a perfect, you know, somewhere. Yeah. I don't know what exactly that looks like, and I'm sort of waiting to see how that emerges. But again, going too crazy with this is not the way to go.
Do the informative years.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I'm gonna hit you with the Jeff Goldblum right now. They realize they can do it, but they never stop to think if they should do it. And it's for me, like, if you're gonna do like spinoffs and shit like that, pick your spots. Like, everyone keeps talking about how great Ana de Armas was in No Time to Die. Okay, I can see a spinoff there if you wanted to do something with her, because the popularity is there. But doing a Money Penny Time piece, or like, it's just like you're reaching at that point.
I think even the Paloma takes away from it. The Paloma is so special. It's like Boba Fett. You don't see much of him in the series. That's why Boba Fett is so special. There's a whole series coming out on Boba Fett. I'm wondering if it's going to be less badass now.
That's crazy that you say that.
He's a nice guy in Jabba's Hutt thing, you know, anointing people. And it's like, what happened to Boba Fett?
Yeah,
that's funny you bring that up, because I was gonna mention how that to me, it's just like Mandalorian's so damn good, and then it's like you hear about this and like, really, like, really.
Well, it's fascinating. Again, it is fascinating because, again, even as I'm sitting here talking about the dangers of overdoing it, like I said, I mean, it's weird how, like, the Mandalorian, when I first saw this, even just the first few frames, I was instantly taken in, and I said, wow. I mean, I felt like just the first few minutes of Mandalorian made you sit back and go, how was this that hard?
Right.
How did you guys not know until just now?
Fans in charge. You need to have
That's right.
fans.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. I mean, honestly, like to me, that whole mood of the opening of the Mandalorian, I said, this to me is, I remember younger reading Star Wars comics, you know, I mean, they were always good. They lived in that Star Wars world. So when I saw Mandalorian, I said, how did this elude you guys for so long? Why does it feel like this was so hard to get to when you just made it look real easy?
Thank God for Jon Favreau, man.
Right, exactly. So I mean, honestly, so I feel like even in the world of Bond, I mean, there are spectacular stories to be told. There are spectacular ways to do it. So I don't want to rain on on this whole idea that they're going to do stuff because they're going to do stuff. But it's finding that sweet spot that's going to be a challenge.
Yeah.
Right.
When Mandalorian came out, the first thing I thought was, this must be what it felt like to see episode 4 for the first time, to me. But to wrap this up, to put a bow on this, what is next? Because now, to me, we've got the biggest question we've got the biggest question mark, I think, in franchise history. So what can we expect in the next couple weeks, couple months? David? Couple years? What do you think? How are they going to continue this?
Yeah, and I think they're still going to keep the momentum going. I mean, I'll just share this very quickly. I mean, I'm going to be getting on a plane shortly after we have this conversation to head to London, where there's an entire week-long press junket. And what I find interesting is they have a fan doing it right alongside Empire Magazine, Variety, all those types of things, and understanding like we've got to move into a new world where, you know, fans and people like this that share the content, to Joe's point, have a say. And so, you know, the things I'll be doing in London around the events, one of them being obviously speaking to the celebrities, it's not just about, you know, oh, we're going to have the New York Times talk to them because it's the New York Times, or, you know, the morning show. It's bigger than that now. And so this whole discussion today has been about the connective tissue between the different actors. I think they're going to keep this momentum going between the fans and actually increase it. I think that if it takes 2 years, 3 years until the next Bond movie, I think that it's fresh enough that they're going to be thinking about different ways to approach it. And that actually gives me a lot of heart that they're doing that. They're not thinking about the kind of traditional way that they moved forward. So I think we're going to actually see that literally in 1 week, but really hard next year. The 60-year anniversary is going to hold things that we haven't seen since the 90s, like conventions, discussions, events, merchandising like we've never seen before. I think that's part of the Greg Wilson world that he's referring to, that it's not going to get quiet over the next few years. And to Joe's point, Amazon ain't going to let it. Like, you know, they're not like, I want to buy this, you know, for a couple $2 billion. I can wait 5 years, no problem.
So say the next one comes out, for argument's sake, 2025. So between today and 2025, do we ever get a calm period, or do we get marketing, documentaries, interviews?
Thanks to
games?
Bond's apartment and being James Bond and Omega Bond watches, hell no, we don't get a quiet moment. But I mean, it sounds like I'm joking, but
you haven't
honestly,
seen my YouTube channel in like 2 months. Then
well, that's because you don't post. I think that they're going to lean on more organically grown content until Amazon comes, and then I think you may get, you know,
explosion.
some things that aren't organic.
Yeah,
I think the next year will be very telling. It's interesting because I think well, actually, let me say it this way. I one of the things I learned from No Time to Die, or one of the things that sort of came to the forefront of my thinking, I noticed that seeing the trailer for the first time, I'm starting to realize I think that's almost 50% of the experience of seeing a new film, because you just get so much from that first trailer that by the time you're seeing the film, you're already kind of mentally just putting together things that you already know are happening. So it's kind of, you know, I would love next to kind of go through the experience of seeing it without knowing anything about the film. But the reason why I'm sort of drawing the parallel, I think the next year is going to tell us a lot about what we're in for. Like, basically, can they just chill out and let the dust settle for a little bit and let, you know, again, why was Goldeneye so popular? Because we had a dry 5 years. Do you think they can go like maybe like even 1 year, just letting everything sit and letting people almost just sort of forget what just happened, so they can kind of come in, you know, soon and kick it up again? Or are they just too anxious? Are they too anxious to let it sit, and then are they going to go crazy? So I think very soon we will know what we're in for in a couple of years, just by how they start to, like Dave said, preheat.
I don't think we're gonna get much time in between, and here's why. In my opinion, we got 2 Mission Impossibles on their way. That's gonna be the talk of the town in the middle of next year, and the middle, you know, the end of next year and the middle of 2023. They're not going to want to sit around and just like leave all this dead space. I think this is going to be a ramp up this year with the anniversary. Then we're going to get the game that's going to kind of like reach out to a new, you know, age group. and then we're gonna like kind of just go right into the films. That's what I really think is gonna happen, in my opinion. But
Yeah.
again, like you said, this is a shift in how they're gonna put the brand out there. And someone asked me the other day, they're like, "Oh, have you heard about the 60th anniversary of Mega Piece yet?" And I'm like, I haven't even
Gorgeous.
thought
It's
about that.
gorgeous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where I'm like, yeah, they called me and they said, "Hey, can you design this watch for us?"
This
And I
is the
was like,
face of it right here.
not have perfect. I love it.
Which
I love
one, the poker chip or the
smile.
smiley face? Okay, so last question for you guys, and we'll do a quick little fire roundtable. Do we find out the next Bond during any sort of 60th anniversary celebration, or is it after? David, I'll go with you first.
During.
Joe?
And I think it would be almost too poetic to think it's going to be on the anniversary of Dr. No.
Right.
I wish their this is going to sound terrible. I wish that their record of doing these things was a little bit more clean, but I don't think they're going to be that cool about it. I think you will get it next year, though. I think you'll get a new actor being announced. And who will it be?
I sure don't know. You know what? Maybe next year. I mean, honestly, there's a part of me that's laughing because it's like, I'm like, guys, figuratively and almost literally, the body isn't even cold yet.
Mhm.
Like, just let it be for a minute.
It's
like, go.
No, it's in a billion pieces.
I mean, so if they come out next year and already announced the new one, I kind of feel like, all right.
Really? October is almost a year away, though.
Yeah.
Like, how long do you mourn for, Joe? Actually, you're not mourning at all. You loved it.
I kind of feel like, yeah, I don't know. I feel like at this time next year, I'd be, I mean, like, seriously, I don't, is the Blu-ray even out yet?
The 21st, December 21st.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I feel like if I was, I would really, if it was up to me, I would try to take at least a year and do almost nothing and kind of look like I would, if it was up to me, I'd be spending the 60th anniversary looking back and not even looking forward. Really, the 60th should be about looking back, and then after that, once that's done, then you go into the next phase and you start to preheat and look forward.
But I think the 10 and a half months leading up to the actual date of the anniversary is going to be about retrospective celebration. So I think it's going to end with, all right, we've looked back, we've celebrated, now here's our way forward. And the new Bond is Joe Darlington.
Oh yeah.
Mark my words, I've seen the roster and you're on it.
Love it.
Lorenzo, next year or after?
I'm with David on this one. It's gonna be next year. I think I was with Joe on this one before the pandemic.
Me too.
I don't think you can burn a year at this point.
Yeah.
Too much stuff's coming and going on. I think they're going to want it to be relevant, and they want to make an impact, and they're going to want to get the ball rolling. Another hiatus like we had, I think, would be the wrong move right now, especially with what's going on with other, tent poles. So
well, the joke's on
I'm
everybody
definitely next
because,
year.
We already announced it here. It was Joe. It's Joe.
Exclusive.
See, I'll just, this is my little closing note. See, it's interesting looking back at the Lucas thing. I think we keep looking over there, to sort of, look forward, to sort of predict, and based on how I mean, you take that moment in time when one of the execs is saying, I think we put out too much stuff too quickly. Was that the lesson? Or was just to make a good show like The Mandalorian? Maybe that's the lesson. You know what I mean? So, but the problem is but now as we look forward to Bond. How do we take those lessons? And what do we don't know what we're gonna do yet? So do we just try our best to make The Mandalorian, or do we have to make a couple bad things before we get to The Mandalorian? Like do we have to learn the hard way? All right,
by
David,
the way, I've got a list
Dave.
right here of things not to do, and they all say don't kill Bond.
Why does it look like my name's on that list? What the fuck?
Bond's apartment, unfollow.
No, it just said Luke. It doesn't even say Bond's apartment. It's just like full on like Luke Joseph. Get him out of here. Well, gentlemen, fantastic conversation today. I can't thank you guys enough for joining us. But yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you guys for listening, watching on YouTube. David, Joe, Lorenzo, thank you guys very
thanks.
much.
Our pleasure.
We will see you guys on the next one.
See you next week.
Thanks, guys.